Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts. Today I pulled out sketch number 14 from the Sketches for the Paper Pad class. This was a Facebook group from a couple years ago. I also pulled out my Kellybell Designs Rock On bundle. This is a digital collection. I printed everything out on a standard format printer and then used the Silhouette print and cut features to cut out my embellishments, and I trimmed down the paper. As you can see, I printed the embellishments in a landscape mode instead of portrait, so I just had to flip the paper over and reprint them on the other side. Sent that through my Silhouette, and the magic of the print and cut, all of my embellishments are now cut out. I really do enjoy using the print and cut features on the Silhouette. It makes creating embellishments so easy and you don't have to fussy cut them out. For this layout, I did decide to add my journaling directly to one of the journaling cards. I do have a tutorial on how to do this. I will link it below for you. I printed out a sampling of the paper because I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to do this layout, and before I printed out a bunch of paper that I wasn't going to use, I decided that I would just try out a few and then I could reprint some more. I did pull out this die from Simon Says stamp. It's called Sexy Hexes, and I'm going to use that to cut out my hexagons. Now, I have a ton of hexagons on this layout, and you might ask, well, why didn't I just use my Silhouette to cut out the hexagons as well? While it is more work to use a die, the impression that you get from the die over the Silhouette is very different. I do prefer the look of the die over the Silhouette. It gives it a beveled edge. So I spent the time cutting out a ton of hexagons. I first started out with just cutting 2 of each of the colors that I had printed out from the paper because I wanted to figure out what I was going to use. I knew I wanted a ton of hexagons because that's what the sketch called for, but I wasn't exactly sure on the placement of them as well as the color order, and I just wanted to make sure before I cut out way too many hexagons that I did have the right configuration and I had the right paper to print out. For the paper that has the recording studio and the little headphones and microphones, I did size that in Silhouette. I used a hexagon in the Silhouette that was the same size as my die to make sure that I could cut out the pattern paper perfectly in the center of my die. I do have a tutorial on printing paper and I will link it below for you guys. For the right hand side of the layout, it is a wall of photos because the left hand side is going to be pretty busy. Here I'm showing you where I printed out the journaling on the presentation paper as well as the photo paper because I wasn't exactly sure which one I wanted to use. Looking back, the color difference between the two of these should have told me that something was wrong, but I wasn't thinking about it. I did end up using the photo because I did like that look better. But you can print it out on the presentation paper or right along with your photos. These photos are of Eli and myself on Rock and Roller Coaster at Hollywood Studios. This is the first time that Eli has ridden the ride. 2 of the photos do come from my Disney Photo Pass, which is the ride photo that's going to be on the left, and then the photo of Eli and myself in front of the area where Rock and Roller Coaster is. The other 3 photos that are on my layout do come from the Disney website as well as the Disney Facebook group. Whenever I'm searching to add photos, because I do prefer to have a double page layout, which means that I want more photos because the photos are the star of the show. I didn't want to do a single page with just us in front of it as well as the ride photo. I want the detail shots. So a close-up of the sign itself, a picture of the huge guitar that's outside the ride, as well as 2 pictures inside the ride. Those type of details are the type of details that I want on my layout, which is why I tend to be more prone to do a double page layout. So I'm okay with going into the Disney website or the Disney Facebook group and pulling photos from there so that I can have additional photos for my layout. So once I got all of the photos on the right hand side of the layout down, I started to work on my hexagons for the left hand side. As you can see, I did start out with a pattern. I was going with red, yellow, blue, black, and then music notes, but I wasn't liking it. I was struggling with placement and I decided that I would channel my friend Nicole. She is so great with color blocking and she does it on almost all of her layouts, and it just turns out so amazing. So after I worked with it for quite a bit, wasn't liking it, I decided that I would pull all the hexagons off and I would start to do rows based on color. So you can see here that I start off with that teal, and then I'm going to move into a gray, black, white combination, kind of a neutral, then the red, and then the yellow. I do change up this order because I am going to struggle with this quite a bit. I knew that I didn't have enough hexagons, but I wanted to figure out the placement and what I was actually going to use before I started to cut out a bunch of the hexagons. I then went off camera and cut out a ton of hexagons. You can see them over on the right-hand side. I then decided that I would start with a row of the red hexagons because it was such a predominant color and I wanted to make sure that it really stood out. If you're taking a look at that red and you're like, that doesn't really look right, you are absolutely right. It is off, and I haven't figured it out yet. So future me is screaming at past Lisa to say, I can't believe you are continuing to work through this and you have cut out all of those hexagons and you haven't realized that there's something wrong. So as I'm trying to figure out the placement of these hexagons, let me tell you exactly what is wrong. I use presentation paper to print. I love presentation paper. I have a video that I will link below where I go into great detail about different types of paper that I have tried, and the presentation by far is my favorite paper. There are two types of presentation paper that you can purchase on Amazon. This is the very first presentation paper that I purchased. It's double-sided and it has a picture of grease on the front of it. It usually runs about $10. Every once in a while you can find it on sale. After I purchased that presentation paper, I found this presentation paper. It is not double-sided. You can see where it doesn't say the word double-sided on it. If you take a look at the front of it, it has a beautiful home on it that says Spacious Dream Home. If you look very closely on the presentation paper, you'll notice that the weight for the double-sided presentation paper is 48 pounds. The weight for the single-sided presentation paper is 27 pounds. Now, I purchased that presentation paper and I'm going to use it because I am not a wasteful person. I do not recommend the single-sided presentation paper, the one that has the house on the front of it. Because it's single-sided, there are two issues. One, it is half the weight of the double-sided presentation paper. And two, you have to make sure that you print on the right side of the presentation paper. I've never had an issue before, and for whatever reason, I did not figure out the right side of the presentation paper. One side of the presentation paper is a white, and the other side is a very soft yellow. However, it is not something that you can see unless you are standing in direct sunlight. Even when I use my studio lights, the light on my phone, it is very difficult to see the difference between the two of them. On this particular day, I printed on the wrong side of the presentation paper. I then proceeded to cut out a bazillion hexagons. Not really a bazillion, but it felt like a bazillion. On the wrong side of the presentation paper. I am using the single-sided presentation paper for my pattern paper. However, I'm using the double-sided presentation paper for all of my embellishments. My thought process was that it's just paper and it's going to be backed on some cardstock, so it wouldn't matter if it was a lighter weight. This is where I went to go print another sheet of the paper, and I printed it on the right side of the single-sided presentation paper, and you can see the vast difference that printing on the right side versus the wrong side. And I was so mad with myself. I show you another close-up here. You can really see the difference between the blues and the reds. The red specifically, you can see how much of a vibrant color is on the right side of the presentation paper. So ultimately, what I ended up doing was using both the wrong side of the presentation paper and the right. I wasn't going to cut out all of those hexagons again. So I did end up pulling out my silhouette and cutting the hexagons that way. It was much quicker, and I decided that I would just add the silhouette option on top of the hexagons that I cut out with my die, because I do still have that beveled edge, so it does give me the look that I want with these hexagons and using the die. But because I had to cut out so many more, I went ahead and used my silhouette. So once again, I'm going to recommend the premium presentation mat that is double-sided, the one that has grease on the front of it. I do not recommend the single-sided presentation paper. It is a few dollars cheaper and you get 100 sheets as opposed to 50 sheets, but it is much thinner and you have to be sure to print on the correct side. I have probably about 20 or so sheets left and I will continue to use it because I am not going to waste it, but I will not be purchasing the one that has the house on it ever again. Every once in a while, the presentation paper does go on sale for about $8 as opposed to $10. I have picked up 2 extra packs when they were on sale. I always post them over in my Facebook group. If you are also going down this hybrid journey with me and you want to purchase some presentation paper, make sure you're joining my Facebook group so that you can find out about the deals and when they are on sale. All right, now that my soapbox is over, let's get back into the layout. I have the silhouette going with my pattern paper. I am continuing to add down the paper that was cut out with the die first, and then adding the correct side of the presentation paper on top of it. And you can absolutely see, even from far away, how much difference, especially that red, is making with the correct side of the presentation paper as opposed to the incorrect side. For the paper that has the music notes on it, the only paper that is included in the collection is the white paper with the black music notes. I do have the Pro version of Canva, and with that I am able to remove the background from paper. So what I decided to do was to remove the background from the white paper so it gave me a transparent look on the music notes. I then added the music notes to the blue, yellow, and red paper. If you guys would like a tutorial on that, let me know. I try to only do tutorials on the free version of Canva because I do want things that are available to everybody. But if you do have the Pro version and you want me to show you how to do that, I am more than happy to do that. Just let me know in the comments below. I did use my photo as well as my title piece to make some pencil marks in the center of the layout so that I knew I didn't have to add some hexagons in the center. I also did add the blue hexagons on the edge of the right-hand side of the layout so that it did go all the way to the edge. Now, you're probably looking at this and you can see some white gaps at the top, especially in that blue and yellow area. I have no idea how, by placing hexagons that were cut with a die and a silhouette, that these were not even. It does not make sense to me. I made sure that my first row was even. I pulled out my T-square ruler. All of the rest of them should have been even, but it wasn't. And I suspect it had something to do with the fact that I have that big hole in the center. I go back to scrapbooking should be fun. I'm not worrying about it being perfect. And all of those little tiny mistakes, I'm gonna hide with embellishments and my photo as well as my title. So I'll show you how I do that in just a second. Once I got all of the hexagons down over on the far right-hand side with the blue, I then started to add some of the pieces to the top. I'm just adding pieces that will fill in the areas at the top. And here you can see that the hexagons that are at the top aren't straight either. They're definitely off. But again, I'm just going with it. After I was done with all of the hexagons, I did pull out this black piece of cardstock and I pulled out one of my border punches. I'm going to add this over to the far left-hand side to cover up the edge of those hexagons so that it does have a flat edge. And I really like the way that this turned out because I have the teal on the very left-hand side as well as the right-hand side. If you guys have been following my channel this month, you'll know that I have been struggling with this ATG, and I knew that it had to do with that roll, but it goes back to I'm not going to throw it away. Even if it's worth $1, it's still adhesive and it works, and I'm going to struggle with it. But I have finally finished that roll and my new roll is on and I've had no issues with it. Super excited about that. I did decide to back my photos on white cardstock, so I pulled out my layering guides to make a perfect layer around the photo. I do have a tutorial on how to use this and I will link it below for you guys if you'd like to check it out. Before I went to add my photo down, I knew that I wanted to add some stitching. And I know what you're thinking. Lisa, seriously? With all of those hexagons, you're going to add some stitching? Why, yes. Yes, I am. I don't add a lot. I actually end up only putting stitching on 11 of the hexagons. I did cut out a template with one of the smaller hexagons from the set and use that as a template to cut my holes around my hexagons. I did cut out 2 different shapes because I wasn't sure which size I wanted, and this was definitely a Goldilocks situation. I really wanted one that was in between and just perfect. One was too big, one was too small, but I didn't have any other size, so I did ultimately go with the larger one because I felt like that stitching would be a lot better. So once I cut out the template, I just used that to poke my holes around the hexagons. I pulled out my threads in the red, black, and yellow. I didn't have a blue that would match the blue paper, so I just foregoed putting stitching on any of the blue circles. I did slow the video down here so that you can not only see the stitching on this layout, but you can see all of those gaps over on the left-hand side that I'm going to cover up. It's perfectly okay that it's not perfect. You can always add embellishments or other pieces to the layout to cover up any mistakes that you have, even large gaps in your hexagons. I did decide to add some fun foam behind my photo just simply because I needed to add some dimension between all of those hexagons and this really great photo. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this is Eli's very first time riding Rock and Roller Coaster, and he enjoyed it, but his picture may look like something else. He is definitely not a person who is great with roller coasters, and even though the photo is right at the beginning, that takeoff is really fast. They captured an amazing photo with his eyes closed. He has definitely got his hands gripped on the handlebars, and he looks very fearful. In the Silhouette software, I did use that hexagon that I made sure was the same size as my hexagon die, and I shrunk down all of my embellishments to make sure that they would fit perfectly on my hexagon. That is one thing that I am loving about hybrid scrapbooking. I can make my embellishments any size that I want, and I can make as many as I want. I don't think I've ever seen a collection that had this many embellishments that were this tiny. Most manufacturers like to have a varying of size, which is great. Normally I love that as well. But for this particular layout, I needed embellishments that were around the 1-inch mark. So I'm just adding the embellishments to some of the hexagons. I'm also adding some of them flat to the layout, as well as using some fun foam on some of them. I absolutely love the guitar picks. I used all 3 of them on this layout. There is a red one that says Rockstar, there's a white one that says Let's Rock, and there's a teal one that says Music Studio Recording, and it has some speakers and a guitar. Over on the right hand side of the layout, I don't have a wide format printer, so I knew that I needed to cover up the seam that I made with that gray striped paper. I added one of the speakers as well as the heart that has the wings, and that covered up the seam, but I did start to build up that cluster a little bit more with that yellow star. I do go back and forth on the layout at this point because I wanted to make sure that I was covering all of the embellishment pieces, and if I needed to add them to the right hand side, I could as well. I did also forget that there's one more guitar pick, and that is the yellow one that has the red fire. I did add that to the bottom of the left hand side of the layout. There was one hexagon in the collection itself. It says Rockstar and it has a microphone, but the hexagon is the wrong way for the hexagons that I added over on the left-hand side, but I like the touch of having the hexagon on the right. So I did add that as well as a music note and the little fingers that are saying rock on, which match perfectly with our little rock on fingers in that photo right below it. As I'm putting the rest of these embellishments down, I do want to encourage you guys to go check out Kellybell Designs. They have every collection that you can think of for any of your Disney photos. While I do love all of the collections that are out there, like Simple Stories and Echo Park, they tend to lean into that red, yellow, and black, which is great for Disney, but sometimes you want a little bit more, even though this one is also red, yellow, and black. But the embellishments that come along with this collection that are specific to the Rock and Roller Coaster is just chef's kiss, and that's why I love Kellybell Designs so much. I can get specific collections that go for rides and characters, resorts that you check into, and even restaurants that you eat at. So make sure you go check them out if you are wanting to scrapbook any of your Disney photos. I have gotten so many layouts done this year being on their design team, and I am super excited to continue to scrapbook all of my Disney memories. I've been a pass holder for 7 years now, and I definitely have a ton of photos that I need to scrap. I did decide to pull out my enamel dots in black, red, yellow, and blue and added them around the layout. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. Like I said, I did do my journaling offline and I added it to the journaling card. It said, Eli was all in until the ride actually started. His first time on Rock and Roller Coaster, he looks like he's hanging on for dear life. Eyes clamped shut, bracing for the chaos. Even though he looked terrified, he made it through. Honestly, I think he kind of loved it. Just don't ask him right after the loop. All right, if you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.